So working on my wife's Jeep again. This will be the last thing I have to do before bringing it in for its safety inspection. We're fixing the rusty rockers today. So as you can see, I've already got the passenger side pretty well done. I just wanted to see what steps went into finishing it and getting it the way I wanted it. I think it turned out pretty good, so I'm going to get started on the driver's side really soon, and then I'll walk you through the steps that I took to get there. So here's a good look at the driver's side rocker. So when I brought it in for the safety inspection, they obviously did a rust test on the rockers. It doesn't look too bad, like there's a couple of bubbles here and there, but the further you go, it gets a lot worse. And actually, when they tested this part, they were actually able to stick their finger right through. So what didn't look too bad ended up being pretty bad. So I'm gonna actually take a hammer to it, and we'll see how bad this is. We'll cut as much of it out as we can. First step is going to be to get this step off the side here, so then we have access to everything. So we got two 13mm bolts holding it onto the frame, and there's a 13mm nut here, and then there's the same thing on the back side, which I've removed already. So take those fasteners off, and then it should just slip right out. All the bolts are removed. Now there's two more screws keeping this mud flap here, and that's also holding on the steps, so just got to take those two screws out and then it should be free. So now that I've got everything out of the way, I'm going to try getting rid of as much of this rust as I can. So for me, the easiest way to do it to start off, to find the worst of it anyway, is to take a hammer and just start beating on the rusty spots. You can already see how bad that is. I'm barely using any force at all, and it's just pounding right through. So I'm going to do that on the whole side and see what we're left with. So I've been at it for about 10 minutes now, and as you can see, most of it is rusted through. I was able to do all of this with a hammer and a pair of pliers, just pulling at it. It started to get a bit harder at this section here. It's still rusted through, but I think what I'm going to do now is take the grinder with a cutting disc on it and then just take that whole chunk out, because if I'm this far already, I might as well just remove the whole thing. Okay, so with that big chunk gone, now that pretty well cleared up the worst of the rust anyway from the rocker. So you can see there's a couple little bubbles here, so I'm going to take a wire brush to these yet, just get them smoothed and cleaned up here as well. And then I'm going to take a hammer and I'm going to start pounding. You can kind of see I started here, but start pounding this upwards, and so it kind of curls in, because the type of rocker replacement I'm using is a slip-on type. Which means you don't have to cut out the entire rocker and replace it. It's just essentially just a piece of metal that covers this, and then you weld that on. So that's what I'll be doing. So by hammering this, it's getting it out of the way, and then the cover will slip nicely over top of this. got all the metal pounded and out of the way, so the next thing I'm going to do now is take the wire brush again to this rust here. As you can see, there's some surface rust starting on the frame. Alright, so that's about as good as I'm going to get it. So what I'm going to do now is grab a can of rust converter, and I'm going to spray it over that, and that should seal it off. I know it's not going to stop the rust altogether, but it'll definitely slow it down. So these are the two products that I'm going to be using. It's the Rust Check Rust Converter. That's what I'll spray right over the rusty parts, and then what that does is it'll seal it off and it turns it into a paintable surface. And then I'll use the Rust Check Black Undercoat to prevent any moisture from getting in there. So what it'll do is it'll cling to the rusty parts, and it'll limit the spreading of the rust anyway. These are the same products that I used on my 66 Oldsmobile that I was working on when I did some repairs on the frame. The frame was pretty rusty on there, and after 2 years or so, there was still no sign of rust formation. So I'm pretty happy with the way those turned out.